rapid debate. We'll do everyone gets 2 minutes. First.
Without the tortoise shell or the straws, can you rest where there is rest? Do you know when to stop? Can you mind your own business without cares, without desiring reports of how others are progressing? Can you stand on your own feet? Can you duck? Can you be like an infant that cries all day without getting a sore throat, or clenches his fist all day without getting a sore hand, or gazes all day without eye strain? You want the first elements? The infant has them. Free from care, unaware of self, he acts without reflection. Stays where he is put, does not know why, does not figure things out, just goes along with them. It's part of the current. These are the first elements. The disciple asked, is this perfection? Thou replied, not at all. It is only the beginning. This melts the ice. This enables you to unlearn so that you can be led by Tao, be a child of Tao. If you persist in trying to attain what is never attained, it is Tao's gift. Can you... This enables you to unlearn so that you can be led by Tao, be a child of Tao. If you persist in trying to attain what is never attained, it is Tao's gift. If you persist in making effort to obtain what effort cannot get, if you persist in reasoning about what cannot be understood, you will be destroyed by the very thing you seek. To know when to stop, to know when you can get no further by your own action, this is the right beginning. This enables you to unlearn so that you can be led by Tao. If you persist in trying to attain what is never attained, it is Tao's gift. If you persist in making effort to obtain what effort cannot get, if you persist in reasoning about what cannot be understood, you will be destroyed by the very thing you seek. To know when to stop, to know when you can get no further by your own action, this is the right beginning. This enables you so that you can be led by Tao, be a This enables you to unlearn so that you can be led by Tao, be a child of Tao. If you persist in trying to attain what is never attained, it is Tao's gift. If you persist in making effort to obtain what effort cannot get, if you persist in reasoning about what cannot be understood, you will be destroyed by the very thing you seek. To know when to stop, to know when you can get no further by your own action, this is the right beginning. This enables you to unlearn so that you can be led by Tao, be a child of Tao. If you persist in trying to attain what is never attained, it is Tao's gift. If you persist in making effort to obtain what effort cannot get, if you persist in reasoning about what cannot be understood, you will be destroyed by the very thing you seek. To know when to stop, to know when you can get no further by your own right action, this is the right beginning. So that you can let by now, so that you can now, be a child. If you persist in trying to attain what is never attained, it is Tao's gift. If you persist in making effort to obtain what effort cannot get, if you persist. This enables you to unlearn so that you can be led by Tao, be a child of Tao. If you persist in trying to attain what is never attained, it is Tao's gift. If you persist in making effort to obtain what effort cannot get, if you persist in reasoning about what cannot be understood, you will be destroyed by the very thing you seek. To know when to stop, to know when you can get no further by your own action, this is the right beginning. This enables you to unlearn so that you can be led by Tao, be a child of Tao. If you persist in trying to attain what is never attained, it is Tao's gift. If you persist in making effort to obtain what effort cannot get, if you persist in reasoning about what cannot be understood, you will be destroyed by the very thing you seek. To know when to stop, to know when you can get no further by your own action, this is the right beginning. This enables you to unlearn so that you can be led by Tao, be a child of Tao. If you persist.
Make an opening statement.
We can have an informal back and forth, Jay. I've got 4 minutes I want to bounce, so I don't want to be a jerk and be like, I'm going to debate you and then bounce in 4 minutes, because we've got to
Jeremy, you scared them?
I'm happy to go back and forth. I'm happy to hear your response and take as much time as you want.
Well, I'll give you my opening statement, and it's really easy. God
I think
is
he's
the necessary precondition for logic, reason, and intelligibility. That's it. If you would like to make your opening statement, I yield my time to you, and you can make yours.
No, I thought I did in making the statement that I made. But can I ask you a question based on? Can I ask you a question? Can I ask you a question? Like when you say that, are you suggesting like there's a universe, therefore there must be a creator, or are you suggesting that like human logic or something found in humans, which you're saying is unique, proves that there is a God? I just want to understand.
Well, where I would begin is that there are logical absolutes like the law of non-contradiction. So it's immaterial, universal, and unchanging. And that's where I would start.
Again, and I'm just trying to understand. So you're saying that because there are some universal laws, right, that seem to be kind of constant throughout the universe, that is proof of a God?
No, I'm just on the first premise, and I just want to see if you accept it or reject it.
I'm trying to understand the premise. You're using like 4 words to make claims of God. So if what you're saying is because of this, I believe there is a God, then I reject your premise.
Well, no, that's a straw man of my position. That's actually begging the question. The first premise I'm using here is not assuming the existence of God at all. All I'm simply saying is that there are logical absolutes. They are immaterial, universal, and unchanging, one of them being the law of non-contradiction.
So you cut off right before the last thing. One of them being the law of what?
No,
Non-contradiction.
And again, are you saying that that's your argument for why there's a God?
No, I'm actually just seeing if you accept the premise or reject it.
I'm sorry, I'm just slow. I have no idea what this has to do with God. I thought we were debating the existence of God or not. It's like saying, like, do you agree or disagree with this being the formula to make a marshmallow? It's like, well, are we talking about God's existence or not? I'm sorry. Like, do I believe that there are absolutes in the universe? That there are philosophies that present impossible problems and contradictions? Like, I don't think any of that has anything to do with God. Like, I'm completely lost. And again, it's probably me. So if you want to walk me through it, I'm happy to.
Well, I'll rephrase it one more time for you. So there are logical absolutes, one of them being the law of non-contradiction. Do you agree with me that it's immaterial, it's also universal, and it's also unchanging? Do you agree with that?
No, I don't know what that law is. Do you want to tell me what that law is? And then I'll let you know what I think about it.
Well, do you know what the fundamental laws of logic are?
No.
Well, you have the law of identity, so something is either A or not A. you have the law of excluded middle. So it is either A or not A, and then you have the law of non-contradiction, meaning you have to be consistent and concise in your logic. It can't contradict itself.
So the law of identity doesn't seem to kind of work, right? Like when we talk about like quantum quirks and even like certain states of matter that are both that present the exact same identity or properties. That like even on the quantum when it is both yes and no at the same time, on and off at the same time, doesn't that start to contradict the law of identity?
So are you a quantum physicist?
No. But so now that you've explained it, so yeah, I disagree with that. I disagree with that.
Just to give a reasonable interruption here. Now I'm trying to meet you halfway where you're at, through possibility. And for an example, if you're not a specialist in the field of quantum mechanics, then I can easily reject what you're saying here on the basis that the chances are is that you don't know what it is that you're talking about because you're not a professional in the field. Now, for the sake of discussion, I would like to get back to the baseline here and say that, claims without evidence can be easily dismissed without it, and it's evident that you're not a professional in the field, and I don't want you to kind of, and I'm being very charitable here, I don't want you to muddy up the waters with things that you are not a professional in the field with. I'm philosophically inept. That's what I'm going with. This is what I'm using, and I'm being clear and concise on that. So if you have like a different example you could use to rebut against the laws of logic to show that it's not universal, it's not immaterial, and it's not unchanging, then I have no choice but to go with my next premise.
Okay, so yeah, just first of all, I'm not a quantum scientist. I do work deeply in the field of quantum computing, and do have some knowledge of it. But again, you don't want to get distracted. 2 minutes past the time I said I was going to bounce. I love talking about God. I think eventually we might have gotten there. I think.
conclusion in the premise, which I'm not doing.
What is your thesis?
That's great. My thesis is essentially that you have logical absolutes like the law of non-contradiction or mathematical absolutes. 2 plus 2 is always going to equal 4. They are immaterial, universal, and unchanging. There is no possible phenomenal world where you're going to find that this is not the case. In all possible worlds, this is the case. Then you have immaterial and universal and unchanging laws that arise from purely material and unchanging universe, meaning that these things are not materialistic things. You can't get life from non-life, okay? We have human reasoning in science. Human reasoning in science presupposes the laws of logic. You have to grant yourself that in order to have the philosophical concept of science. And communication relies on the existence of logical absolutes, i.e. the law of non-contradiction, the law of excluded middle, and the law of identity. So, therefore, the existence of logic is a transcendental source beyond the material universe. So this can take place within your mind that is completely intangible and non-materialistic. You can't break open someone's head and look at the brain chemicals and find where the logic is, where the pound of love is at, where the pound of hate is at. It's purely subjective. Last but not least, the only sufficient explanation for a transcendental source is the existence of God. My conclusion is therefore God must exist as a necessary precondition for logic, reason, and intelligibility.
First of all, there's a huge gap between your last premise and your conclusion. Okay, because the existence of a transcendental source, right? It doesn't follow that the existence of a transcendental source suggests that there aren't other factors that are unknown to mankind, and that we have excluded.
So are you claiming that the lack of evidence is evidence?
Let me finish. Okay, it does not exclude all other unknown factors. Okay, that could have contributed to this or describe.
Can you explain to me what those unknown factors are?
Let me finish. Or describe.
No. You made a claim. I want you to talk about the unknown factors.
You interrupted me. I didn't interrupt you. Okay.
Well, I would like you to explain what those unknown factors are.
Yeah, you can ask me that after I finish, because I have a train of thought that I don't want to lose, and I didn't interrupt you. Okay, so it doesn't follow. Okay, because there are several other factors. Okay, that are unbeknown to mankind. We have limitations in science and mathematics and logic, and philosophical limitations. Okay, that do not allow us to completely acquire descriptive understanding and prescriptive understanding of all other variables that could explain this transcendental process. Therefore, we cannot exclusively tie the existence of that transcendental process to that if we have not considered other variables. Okay, so that's one premise. Secondly, for an immaterial God that doesn't exist, it's very important in philosophy that you use the correct framework.
Okay, now can I deal with that? You said a lot there. I need to unpack.
Well, yes, that's one. The second one is that you cannot use a framework that is an inappropriate framework to describe something. For instance, I cannot use a mathematical framework to describe my feelings. Okay, that wouldn't make any sense. How do you? What is the formula for my?
I'm just trying to become a big content creator one day.
That's a pejorative.
Yeah, I'm not using my feelings to come to these conclusions. I'm actually appealing to something that's purely
I didn't say you
absolute and objective outside of my feelings.
I never made the assertion you were. That's
okay, great. So I would like to address that first premise, as I gave everybody the chance to address the first premise that I made. Now, I will say this much: your claim that lack of evidence, without any kind of explanation as to what the lack of evidence is not evidence in itself.
The right framework must be used to address the object, right? You can't use a mathematical framework to address something that is non-mathematical. You can't use a logic framework to address something that is non-logical, right? What is logical must be, logical frameworks can only be applied to logic, and mathematical frameworks can be applied to things like geometry. and other.
So you don't think that there's an entailment of logical absolutes that are presupposed before we arrive at the scientific method, which incorporates mathematics as well? How do you how do you accurately and specifically delineate that and make a case based on that? Because all you're doing is making claims and assertions at this point. So I would like to get back to your first premise where you're explaining that lack of evidence is evidence. Now, I'm in the dark about that. What is this lack thereof that we're in the dark of? Well, that's the conclusion I'm getting from it. So I would like to understand how lack of evidence is evidence.
I never said lack of evidence was evidence. That's your assertion. That's your interpretation of what I said. And that has nothing to do with what I said. What I said was that you have not proven, okay, without a shadow of a doubt, that there are other variables that we have not yet discovered due to the limitations of science, due to the limitations of our power, due to the limitations. Please stop interrupting me. If you have a strong argument, you don't need to interrupt me. You can just let me finish.
Well, that's an ad hoc fallacy if you have an explanation for your claims and your assertions.
Let me finish. Okay. You have a limited methodology called science. You have a limited methodology called mathematics that is still in and of itself still primitive, relatively primitive. Okay, primitive to the infinite scope of what this our existence and what this world is. In other words, we know, and you would assert, based on your theism, that the world is not just material, or even material and immaterial. Okay, there are also supernatural elements that we do not yet understand. Right? So you would have to demonstrate how a limited scientific material methodology can explain something that is...
Seneca, is English your first language?
So, once again, we're at this ad hoc fallacy where you made a bunch of claims and assertions based on the lack of studying that we have, and that we're still primitive in mathematics, and we're still primitive in logic, reason, and so on and so forth, that you're going to violate the laws of logic and the mathematical absolutes that we have to say that there are other means out there that we haven't discovered yet. And I'm just left in the dark as to what it is that you're talking about. And if you don't know what it is that you're talking about, then that's essentially an ad hoc fallacy. You're giving me absolutely no explanation, then lack of evidence is the evidence for my claim.
You made the affirmative claim. The burden of proof is on you.
No,
okay, I don't have to give you an explanation.
So once again, I'm trying to investigate the claim that you made.
You laid out premises that are filled with facts.
So I'm investigating the claim that you made. It's a rebuttal.
From your fourth premise to conclusion, and I just told you.
So how come you can't?
I'm just trying to become a big content creator one day.
Scientific methodologies.
So you're saying
to describe things that you don't even understand, that you don't even know exist.
Excuse me, there's other people listening here and on the stage, and I'd like to listen to something that Jay has to say. I think you're over talking and you're not a mod. Could mod please put me in the queue? Thank you, mod. Thanks, Jay.
Then we can. Nobody's listening to your wisdom.
Why are you over talking, man? I asked you a clear and concise question.
Because you're over talking me, so I'm going to over talk you. Then we can conclude. You're theistic, that God exists. But without that, you cannot conclude.
You need to stop.
No, you need to stop. No, you need to stop.
So you made a claim as your rebut, but you didn't give me any evidence at all in your rebut. You just made the claim.
I gave you the evidence.
Wait a minute. Are you listening to me? Sir, you're not listening to me.
You're being disingenuous because you know you don't have an argument.
No, listen.
That's why you need to
Verbatim said that because we're in our infancy of mathematics and logic, that there are other things and other variables that we don't know about. Now, when I ask you a clarifying question, what are these things that you're talking about that we don't know about? And you have no explanation for it, meaning you have no foundation for your rebut. So if you have no foundation for your rebut, then it's just ad hoc.
Are you suggesting that science can explain everything and anything universally?
Are you going to answer my question?
Are you suggesting, I just asked you a question, are you suggesting that science can
I
explain
asked you
everything and anything. I'm not afraid of your mouth, though. I could just okay. Are you suggesting that science can explain everything in life?
I'm suggesting that you can't explain anything, and you're saying
Are you suggesting that science has an unlimited...
So you don't know what an ad hoc fallacy is.
Great, thank you. Clearly, you don't want to answer that because you know it's
Why are you stuttering?
okay.
So clearly you need an ad hoc fallacy. You claim that
This
lack
is
of
what
evidence
stupid
is
people
evidence.
do when they can't support an argument.
And then you didn't
disrespectful.
even give me an explanation. What are the things in the dark that we haven't discovered yet?
The explanation is on you. You gave premises.
You made a claim and an assertion. So claims and assertions without evidence can be easily dismissed without it.
Okay, and I dismissed them. Okay, using the frameworks that you used were logic.
You're dismissed. If you're going to claim there are things that we don't know about mathematical absolutes and logical absolutes, I want to know what it is. And if you can't explain that to me,